And welcome everybody to an extra edition of the Every Second Matters podcast. Today we have Jeff Knox joining us. Welcome everybody to let me turn that off. Extra edition. We've got Jeff Knox joining us from Firearms Coalition. Now, I guess I usually describe you as an author, a researcher, and an activist, but I think it's probably better to let you introduce yourself and describe yourself. But if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and your dad, if you would. And then Firearms Coalition.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always good to get out and talk with folks. As you say, my name is Jeff Knox. I am the managing director of the Firearms Coalition. We have been in the business of informing, educating, lobbying, and coordinating the efforts to move the Second Amendment forward, to restore the Second Amendment, to preserve the Second Amendment, to advance the rights of individuals to firearms. And that's what we do. Firearmscoalition.org, firearmscoalition.org is our primary website. You can find decades of articles there covering almost every topic that you can imagine. I write a weekly for WorldNet Daily at wnd.com. It comes out usually late Thursday, early Friday, and it covers the news of the day with my analysis. Also have a regular column in Firearms News. What used to be Shotgun News Magazine is now Firearms News Magazine. And my column is in there in every issue. And it's covered on ammoland.com and several other sites. What we primarily do is education and information, strategic thinking, analysis, looking at what the problem is and how we can best address it. I work closely with a lot of grassroots leaders from around the country, helping them to be as effective as they can be in what they're doing at the local level. And anybody who's a member of Gun Owners of America, the National Rifle Association, Second Amendment Foundation, Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, any organization, you should also be a member of your local grassroots group. Whatever state you live in, wherever you are in the country, there are local guys who are working for you every day that your state legislature is in session, and most days when it's out of session, and they need your help and your focus. And that's one of the things that we try and focus on, is helping them to be more effective.
So I know that you do a good job of researching, so you do the job of clarifying some of the news of the day.
Right. It's easy for people to get things confused, and it's easy for people to take something small and blow it up. It's easy for people to see something big and think that it's not important. I try very hard to be an accurate and focused voice without the hype, without the conspiracy theories and dire consequences and so forth. Just the facts, as Sergeant Friday used to say. Some on the other side especially would disagree with that and would argue that I'm a fearmonger, but I don't see it that way. If, for instance, Hillary Clinton wants to basically eradicate the Second Amendment, well, I will say that, and that is what she wants to do, and she has the means of doing it. I've been getting in arguments with our own guys over this, that you couldn't repeal the Second Amendment, you couldn't reverse the Heller decision, you couldn't pass an amendment to do away with the Second Amendment. They don't need to. They don't need to do any of that. All that Hillary Clinton needs to do is appoint someone to replace Judge Scalia, who passed away in February, and it's done. because then she has a solid 5-vote majority on the Supreme Court that wants the Second Amendment to be meaningless, and all they have to do is take any case that comes up the channel that deals with gun rights and say, yeah, it's not a violation of the Second Amendment. And now the Second Amendment means nothing. It is effectively removed from the tool chest of our efforts, and we would not be able to effectively litigate any gun control law, no matter how heinous or oppressive. The only law that we would be able to actively litigate would be a law that banned the possession of functional handguns in the home for self-defense purposes. They could make it as difficult as they wanted for you to do that. They could make your ammo supply limited. They can limit the number of bullets you have. They can limit the capacity of your magazine. And as long as the Supreme Court says, oh yeah, that's okay, and it's not a violation of the Second Amendment, for all intents and purposes, the Second Amendment is neutered. And that's what Hillary could and would do. That's a fact. That's not hype. That's not fear-mongering. That's simple truth.
Well, and then acknowledging the, well, literally what she's, you could say hinted at or just said, depending on when you listen to her, acknowledging her position and her goals is different than insightful headlines to every blog post or, what were we saying before, headlines that are meant to strike fear in every situation that comes along.
It's a different kind of shock and awe, but it is relatively the same effect.
Right. And one of the things that we're dealing with, and I probably should have, as we started off, given a little bit of my personal bona fides. I've been in this fight my entire life. I grew up in this. My father was a gun writer. He was the founding editor of Gun Week newspaper, which was very popular for many years. He then was the founding editor of Rifle magazine and the editor of Handloader magazine, and was one of the top gun writers in the country. And many of the top gun writers, the old guys that are out there now, apprenticed under Dad or learned from Dad, and that's my background. Dad went from being a top-line competitor. He was a national champion bench rest shooter. He was a top-line gun writer and editor, nationally recognized, very respected, and was a political activist while doing that, and he shifted over to full-time political activism. He was the executive director of the NRA Institute for Legislative Action. He was one of the key movers in the Cincinnati revolt at NRA that shifted the focus of NRA from just a shooting sports group to a political group. He nominated Harlan Carter to be the executive vice president of NRA. And then he went on to introduce the McClure-Volkmer Firearms Owners Protection Act. He brought that to Washington with him as executive director of ILA. He basically wrote that bill and fed it to Senator McClure and Congressman Volkmer and got them to introduce it on NRA's behalf. And that's why you can now put an unloaded gun in your trunk and drive anywhere in the country as long as you're going somewhere where it's legal for you to have it and you're coming from somewhere that it's legal for you to have it. That wasn't the case before the Firearms Owners Protection Act finally passed in 1986. It was introduced in 1979. But
oh wow.
Yeah, and we could have gotten it passed in 1982 probably if they hadn't fired Dad, but that's a whole nother story. Dad later was the vice president of NRA. He was in line to be the president, and a dispute over the way finances were being handled was caused internal strife within NRA, and in that internal political game, Dad lost, and the others won, and Dad was kind of pushed out of the chairs. Charlton Heston was brought in specifically to run against Dad, beat Dad for the vice president slot by 4 votes, and Dad kind of stepped away from NRA activism and but continued with the Firearms Coalition. The Firearms Coalition itself, Dad created in 1984 because the National Rifle Association was lying to the members on the issue of the armor-piercing bullet ban that was being proposed at that time. Mario Biaggi out of New York had proposed this armor-piercing bullet ban that pretty much would have made all bullets illegal. And the NRA was reporting to their members that they were opposing the ban flat out, but they were at the same time at the negotiating table with Biaggi and his people trying to work out some sort of an agreement. And they managed to do that, which came back and bit us, as Dad predicted that it would, with the whole green tip ammo ban that ATF tried to push through not long ago. The Firearms Coalition was created at that time to inform people about what was really going on in Washington, and we've been at it ever since. That was 1984. It's been over 30 years that our organization has been out there informing people of what's really going on, looking at the facts and straightening out confusion or dissimulation from our own side and the other side. And so that's one of the main things that we do and try to do is be sure that nobody's pulling the wool over your eyes.
It's definitely refreshing to have an unbiased and objective perspective on things.
Well, I can't say that I'm unbiased or totally objective, but I try to be as bias-free as I possibly can. I actively work at trying to present things as clearly and as directly as I possibly can. And anything that you read in any of my columns or on our website or my Facebook postings, you can pretty well rely that there is documentation to back that up. And Dad was better at footnoting than I am, but it's, as I say, I've been in this for a long time. I'm 56 years old now, and have been heading up the Firearms Coalition for 12 years, writing a weekly column for all of that time, and before. And so I have a perspective on history and the history of the fight that a lot of people don't have. It's a little frustrating at times when I get into an argument with someone on Facebook challenging something that I'm saying or challenging my view, when this is a 24, 26, 28-year-old guy who's been in the gunfight for 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. I've been in the gunfight for 40 years. So be careful, slow down, take a look at who you're dealing with before we get carried away. I was earlier lamenting the lack of the elder statesmen in the gun rights movement, and it's not a complete lack. We have folks like Larry Pratt and Alan Gottlieb, who have been in the fight for a long time, and they offer a useful perspective, and I respect what they have to say all the time and appreciate that. I don't always agree, but I always respect and appreciate what those guys have to say.
Yeah, it illustrates that we're not all walking in lockstep, that there's dedicated people on the same team that don't necessarily all follow the same path to get to the same goal.
Right, and one of the things too is we and Dad always encouraged organizations to work together. The video that you're running right now is a video of Dad talking about comparative stopping power, killing power, deadly effects of assault weapons versus popular hunting rifles and so forth. And this video was actually made out in Dad's backyard in Virginia, and the guy behind the camera was Larry Pratt, and they did that as a cooperative effort. Larry recruited Dad to do it. They were talking about this, and one of the differences and one of the distinctions when it comes to the gun rights movement or anything in gun rights, one of the distinctions that we have from many others is that we are absolutely gun guys from the ground up. And Larry depended on Dad's expertise in firearms, and that's why he came to him. At the time that was made, a video camera was a rarity. Not many people had portable video cameras back then.
That's why I wanted to bring this up, because when we're talking about what is the Firearms Coalition, I think that I suspect people might recognize the Knox name for all the stuff your dad did, and then now you're doing with the articles and like Shotgun News. I know people are probably remembering now. Oh yeah, I'm getting familiar with it. But the Firearms Coalition, you might wonder, and one of the reasons we're doing the Every Second Matters campaign to help show everyone the playing field, who the players are, to illustrate what the Firearms Coalition does, the type of things that they do. You might know the year that this was made, but like you just said, really what matters is this was done well before the internet, at a time when what did we have options available to us? Maybe the NRA magazine, maybe a couple of other national periodicals that related to firearms, some hunting magazines, nowhere near the variety that we have now. Maybe some newsletters that you get at gun shows or at your local gun shop, or maybe at the hunting club or at the shooting range, but very little as far as communication back then. So this video that they made not only showed very effectively and clearly for people that are both firearms knowledgeable and people that are just uninterested in firearms, very clearly by shooting a watermelon first with the 7.62 by 39 at this watermelon on a bench a few yards away, and just showing it fall over. And I don't know if they did this, if they choreographed this, or if it was just happenstance, but it was excellent, because you see that and you think, oh my, that just blew up a watermelon. But then what they do is they contrast it, like you say, with just typical hunting guns that you can buy at any sporting goods store anywhere, 30-06, and it just obliterates the watermelon. So it's an excellent visual example of how ridiculous that whole argument of assault rifles being more deadly than anything else. And it's also a great example to the gun owners, the people that are going to say, well, I don't need an assault rifle, so yeah. But then as soon as you show them what their 30-30 does compared to an assault rifle, and why anyone would think the antis aren't going to go after the more effective gun immediately after they get rid of assault rifles, kind of illustrates that to both sides of the fence really well.
My favorite line in that video was when Dad shot the watermelon with the 12-gauge shotgun and said there wasn't a grenade in there because it just vaporized.
Exactly. It disappears. And again, this was at a time when people couldn't go online and see this kind of stuff. This was not what you're seeing on 60 Minutes or on, really wasn't any other national level news except for your evening news. So you weren't going to see this stuff otherwise. The fact that these guys went out and saw that there was a need, saw that they had the resources to fulfill that need, and then distributed it, is what the Firearms Coalition did and does. You guys are
this was sent out on videotape cassettes, VHS tapes, to people who mail $5 and we'll send you this VHS cassette tape.
I first saw it in the 80s at a hunter safety course when I was a little kid, having to get my hunter safety course to go hunting, and And that's why I was going to play the video too, because I think a lot of people might, again, recognize the name Knox, but once they see your dad in this video has been around since the internet's been around. This video has still clearly illustrates our point that assault rifles are basically the most, worthless of firearms, really, as far as effectiveness, and this illustrates it so well, like we said.
Absolutely. And something else, as you talk about the technology and so forth, at that time, that was 1986 probably, and at that time, it might have been a year or two after that, but Dad, you want to talk about cutting edge technology. Dad ran a bulletin board, a computer bulletin board that you could log into. He did voice updates had a computer card called a Watson that was a automated answering machine, and he did daily updates on what was going on in Washington on his answering machine on that Watson card.
Wow.
And people could call in, and it was an audio blog before the word blog had been invented, that he was giving daily updates of what was going on, and people could call in and listen to the update. And he had the bulletin board going where people could go in, and it was just a text bulletin board, a text chat room, and that was and he was at a time when magazines had 3-month lead times. Dad was a magazine editor and publisher, so he understood what the magazines were going through, and the magazines that would publish his stuff, he had agreements with several of them that they would wait until they were doing paste up, or even to the point where they were ready to take pictures, because the way it used to be done was they had to typeset the articles and everything and paste them onto a big board, and then they would take photographs of that board, and that's what your magazine page was. There was a board for each page of your magazine, and it was literally photographed and then printed from the photograph. And Dad had worked out with some of his publishers that he would format his own columns and typeset them, and he would FedEx them, this typeset column, to the publisher, to the printer, so that they would stick it on the board as they're taking the picture. And he was able to cut weeks, if not over a month, off of the production time. So his articles were always much more timely than most of the other guys. And it was just one of the things that he was always trying to do. And when we got into Shotgun News, we had to pay for that space. Joe Desai of J&G Sales up in Prescott knew that Dad was having difficulty finding outlets for his information, and Joe had 16, 18, 20 pages in every issue of Shotgun News. So Joe gave Dad a half page, and Joe continued paying for it and had them put Dad's column in there, and that was, I don't know, 20 years ago, more.
Well, that's
and
awesome.
So we've been in Shotgun News ever since.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
Incredible.
That's excellent.
Just shows that sometimes business and friendship can go hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely. And commitment. I mean, Joe Desai was committed to the cause and believed in what Dad was doing and what Dad was saying, was worried about the direction that NRA was going at the time, and wanted Dad's voice to be heard. So he stepped up, and it continues. And I'm kind of embarrassed now because I look at the Firearms News as it's coming out now. It's allowed my columns to fall behind, and so frequently you'll see a column in there that's months old, and I'm frustrated by that. So I'm working with the editor to try and get those columns more timely and more immediate. And hopefully that's going to be happening over the next few months as we move towards this election, because this election is just critical and folks need to be really paying attention and involved.
Well, maybe that'll transition into one of your other projects with Gun Vote or Gun Voter.
Gunvoter.org, and gosh, I wish that project had taken off and was working better. It's a forum site. I created it a number of years ago, and each election cycle I have worked to try and build up the membership and participation of the forum, and it's I don't think that's it, but I've tried to build it up, and I was really hoping that this year was going to be the year that gunvoter.org really hit that critical mass of enough users that it could really become active and useful tool, and so far it hasn't. We're still struggling. If there are guys listening or guys who want to be involved in a project, there's a project that you can get involved in. We need guys who want to do research and publish information, and this site is a great place to do it. We really want, if you're a member of your local grassroots group, take their newsletter and post it up in the state section of the website on the forums. If your grassroots group wants their own section in the forum, we'll do that for them. The objective is to have information on every politician running for office from a gun owner perspective, from a gun rights perspective. Every race in every town in every state in the country should be in gunvoter.org, but the only way that can happen is if we get guys participating in the program. We don't have 500 employees to be researching this and updating this and keeping it keeping the information fresh. We have to have users who are doing that. So anybody who's listening that wants to try and get seriously involved in this election and future elections, come on over to gunvoter.org and let's make something happen.
Excellent, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with Every Second Matters, is to let people know about these resources that are out there, because I know we, and personally, friends of ours have put in efforts towards similar goals, and it's always frustrating when you get a lot of work into a project and then find out that somebody's already done it, and you're just you're rebuilding a mousetrap when you could have just been adding to their efforts.
Well, and one of the things that, as I talked about cooperation and Larry Pratt running the camera for Dad in that video, it's one of the troublesome realities of not just this effort, but any effort like this, is that groups think of themselves as competing instead of complementing. And we need to work towards cooperation and complementing, and away from this concept of competing. Yes, it's true that having kudos for accomplishing something in a state means that it improves your efforts to raise money moving forward, but the pie is much, much, much bigger than the pieces that we're getting right now. Each organization is getting their piece of the pie, and they tend to think that the other organizations are stealing something from their pie, and that's not true at all. Cooperating, we can make the pie bigger, and everybody grows, and the effort is improved, and that's what we need to be focusing on and need to be doing, and it's challenging. It's really challenging.
Well, I want to thank you for putting in the effort. I know, from my perspective on it. It's definitely challenging, and it's an effort to continue to put in the work. So I've been doing it for a few years. I can't imagine doing it for a few decades, let alone multiple decades that you've been doing it. Your dad was doing it. So thanks for, by proxy, for the people that are watching for putting in that effort and continuing to do so. And thanks for coming on to explain the group and yourself and your dad. And hopefully we'll have you back on. And I really do see Smeggy, one of the guys on the Gun Channels chat, mentioned that that's similar to our Every Second Matters forum, and that was my dilemma when I was putting together the system. I didn't want to add a forum because I knew that there was people out there who had already done stuff. So it seems like we might be able to send, if we collect people at Every Second Matters that are activists and want to be able to distribute, repost valid info from their areas, we'll definitely be sending them over to gunvoter.org.
Well, and we can easily incorporate gunvoter.org into your site so that we become your forum site.
Exactly. I'd be happy to do that.
And that's definitely doable with your primary channel on our forum site. It's amazing what can be done with that. And unfortunately, I'm not an expert at managing these bulletin board forums, but I know it can be done, and once we figure out what we want to do, then we find somebody who knows how to do it, or we figure out how to do it, and we can move forward. But I know it's all possible, and I'd love to see that happen, and I wish it's, for instance, when you have some of the larger forums that don't allow political talk on their forum. And I've approached several of these guys.
Like gun-specific forums, you mean, like the big gun chats where people are talking about guns, yeah.
Yeah, AR15.com type places that I've approached them and said, hey, you guys don't allow, and AR15.com does allow political discussion, but I just use them as an example of a big outfit. But some of these forums, hand-loading forums and the hunter forums and so forth, strictly forbid any kind of political chatter. And I've approached them and said, guys, let's do a tie-in. You don't want politics. I talk guns some. I mean, most of our guys are gunnies, but our focus is politics. So why don't we combine, and you can send people when they want to talk politics, you can just dump that thread over onto gunvoter.org, and we can be sort of a subgroup of your organization. And oh no, that would be taking clicks away from us. We won't do that. And
see, and that's the part that they're missing, because when we do come together, as you're saying, like that, we become more than the sum of our parts. We become more than that. And
absolutely. So it really is. It's a challenge to try and get that to happen, and to convince people that it's a good thing, that it is helping both of us to help each other. And the more we do that, the better we will be, and the better we'll grow. And I would love to team up with you guys and work with it. I think it would be jolly.
One of the things that got me encouraged to take Sean's suggestion to take Every Second Matters to the next level is when, at the Gun Rights Policy Conference, when the time came for you guys to talk, and then you kind of, well, each of the groups was a little bit different, but for the most part, you would give a sit rep of what you'd done, and then where you're going, and then what you need. And a couple of the groups at various sizes said that they needed technical help, web work, or just bodies. Sometimes it was more legal stuff that it's out of my forte. But whenever I hear people in need of the kind of stuff that I do for a living, it clicks, right? So I'm thinking, okay, if there's more than one group out there and I know from working with Arizona Citizens Defense League, there's so many things available to an organization, so many different ways to run a website, so many different ways to organize your group, your members, as far as newsletters and forums and all these different things. And then there's a certain amount of maintenance and upkeep and things that are necessary for those. So I can understand the frustration there. And then that either becomes a cost, or you have to rely on a few key people. So what I'm hoping the Every Second Matters campaign can do is help gather resources of all types. So I know that there's things we're forgetting, like legal and female point of view. We often forget about that. So there's other things, but for the technical side, if we can gather a lot of the tech people who can do some of this tech work in our sleep, like we literally do this stuff so many times a day that it takes longer to describe how well we can do it and just do it. Then if we can bring those kind of resources, those are the kind of things that are very easy for someone in Nebraska to help an organization in Connecticut, who can then take their resources and devote them to getting more people at gun shops or whatever it is they really need to do. So I'm hoping that we can, again, as Z said, come together and accomplish more as a unit than we can as individuals. And awesome. I'm glad we were able to have this discussion. I do want to keep it kind of on topic, but we are going to have our long format show tomorrow. We're going to be doing that on the 2nd of every month. And of course, Jeff, you're welcome to join us at any time. You can. I know you've got publishing deadlines and stuff, but the 2nd kind of falls on a different day usually each month. Hopefully you can jump in, and what I'm hoping to do is play like the recording here, so that a portion of the show will be kind of pre-recorded, but then with an open invite to the various representatives from all the gun owners' rights groups. I think it'd be an interesting dynamic to just give you guys a platform to chat amongst yourselves, and I think
it would be like the Super Friends.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I suspect our audiences will really dig getting some insight as to the way the groups work together and the camaraderie that you all have that I got a glimpse of, and then a little bit of that behind the scenes, and that's got to be encouraging for the people out there that consider themselves activists but sometimes feel like a drop in the ocean when really we're all, we need all those drops, otherwise we're never going to break down this dam.
Right. Without each drop, there's no ocean.
Presidential cycle in a long time. So if we really can't come together and agree now, with this being our potential future, we need this now more than ever.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I applaud what you guys are doing, and look forward to working with you.
Right on. So again, the best way to contact you directly would be through your main website, which is firearmscoalition.org, and that's basically to get an extract about everything you're doing. It's like your blog and then your archives of all the stuff you've done over the years. Right,
and that website, I hate to admit, is a bit of a mess right now. We got hacked a while back, and restructuring has become problematic. But they can also find me on Facebook and Twitter. My Facebook rotates over to Twitter. I'm everywhere. Do guns, Knox. You'll find me.
Well, that's an interesting thing, and it makes me think maybe this is something I should ask just as a general question, because I know a lot of the people that listen are also content creators and people that want to get their own content out there. What social platforms do you prefer? Do you use Facebook because everyone else does, or do you like that system, or is Twitter your thing?
Because it's what I started with. Somebody talked me into going onto Facebook years ago, and I did, and I saw potential in it. Facebook has changed things to a degree to reduce the potential that it once had, but I found it useful. I'm always open, looking for other ways that'll work better, but I'm not the most tech-savvy guy in the world, and so I'm out there looking to learn as we go on, and looking for that guy to be my guru, to tell me where I need to be and how I need to be doing it.
We might be able to help you out with that.
Well, I'm open to it, Bob. I'm definitely open to it.
Well, and I guess that brings up another thing, an aspect that hopefully Every Second Matters can accomplish then would be to allow Jeff and others who don't necessarily have enough time or interest or inclination really to keep up with the Joneses on all these different social medias, when we do have tons of people that love being at the beginning of that curve, right? And allow them to help, again, amplify and distribute messages that are of value. And again, I don't know if we need to actually so far everything's kind of happened organically, so we'll just kind of see how it goes. But again, we're attracting people that are activists and people that are interested in figuring out where to use themselves and their resources. So again, you can contact Jeff. It sounds like through Facebook is then the easiest way for you.
Facebook, you can email me anytime. It's just jeff@firearmscoalition.org. And the Facebook, I usually check in there at least once a day, and am usually around it. Have little things, I don't know why they do, but they pop up on my screen that tell me that somebody said something on Facebook. So I'm aware of it, and I usually touch base in there on a regular basis. And I try and post my columns immediately as they come out there and on my website. And we just try and get the information out there as quickly and as accurately as we can.
And I saw that your most recent post on the Facebook is about the nitrocellulose, and I don't want to get too far into it on this, but we talked about it off air. We'll talk about this again because you have a very concise way to basically sum it up.
Well, I think that we should, as long as you've raised it, we should at least mention the sky is not falling. It doesn't look like it's going to fall anytime soon, and you don't have to go out and buy ammo today. The ATF explosives guys were changing around an interpretation of the way nitrocellulose needed to be handled. It was perceived that that could become a problem for storage and transportation for the powder manufacturers and importers. And they said, hey, wait a minute, guys, this could become a problem if you tried to make us do this. And ATF said, oh, yeah, well, okay, well, never mind. Let's talk about it and figure out what we can or shouldn't do, and we'll work it out. But some of the websites out there and news services and so forth kind of ran with the story and used clickbait headlines and got it really carried away and turned it into a tempest in a teapot. It's not, and that's the thing. Quit forwarding the sky is falling emails about the ATF backdoor gun control powder regulation. It's really not happening. It's something to keep an eye on. It's something that we're aware of, but it's not a calamity that's happening right now. And people can kind of cool down and stop worrying because it's okay.
And that's to say that I've already liked and shared your column that you posted. Again, thank you very much on that.
My pleasure.
Version, we got the link to your Facebook though, so people can read your whole blog post. Right?
Yeah, go back and look at them. There's a lot of them there, and I think a lot of good information. And I hope people will visit, like it, follow it. That's one of the things a lot of people don't understand, differences in the way they link on Facebook. Follow me so that you get my posts, so that you see what I'm saying, and please then share me, because that makes a big difference. When we do the emails, forward those emails. That's important. It makes a difference.
Seriously, I know that being adult males, we lived before the internet, so we tend to dismiss a lot of the bells and whistles and gimmicks on those things as the stuff there for kids. But when you think about how these systems work, if we want a valid article with a sober perspective on something that's important, if we want that to rise to the top of the suggested articles that are going to show up along with people who are similar to yourself, then that's the way you allow the system to recognize that this is an article of significance. And I'm guilty of it myself. I have full knowledge how these things work, and a lot of times I'll just not click on stuff, but I try to remember that it's important to click that little heart or that little thumbs up or whatever little cartoon thing that seems like childish, because that is how the system is told by its users that this is a valid item and to recommend it, and that's what gets it distributed. So it's important for the content itself, but then it also tells the system that there's gun-related activity that is interactive. And when you look at it from the the numbers side. Somebody that's running Facebook and worrying about the budget, when they have a decision to make about if guns should be banned or something, and we're a significant portion of their numbers, if we're a significant portion of their income, it's going to be a little tougher for a capitalist to make that decision based on what they're being pressured by someone, with an agenda. So we can either do nothing and allow the systems to just witness what we look at, or we can interact with the systems and become part of them. And I guess I'm just trying to offer a little insight to the nuts and bolts of it, that we're not just asking as a favor. It's really making the system work and letting the people that run the system know that firearms are a valued portion of that system, and it's a little less apt for them to push us out.
Right, and it really does matter. Or like, for instance, my column at WorldNet Daily, I post that column on Facebook, but to read the column, you have to go out to WorldNet Daily. You have to click the link and go out to WorldNet Daily, WND.com. And when people don't, that hurts me. When people don't leave comments at WND. I had an editor, actually the boss man at WND, Joe Farah, was kind of raising his eyebrows and saying, well, Jeff, we don't see all that much traffic on these last few columns. We haven't seen many comments on these columns. And the fear is that he's going to say, well, it's not worth it for us to host you anymore, and we're going to quit carrying your stuff. And that would be a bad thing. If you like my voice, if you want my voice out there and heard, you have to let the folks at Shotgun News, Firearms News, WorldNet Daily, Shotgun News or FirearmsNews.com, wherever, AmmoLand, wherever I'm published, when you see it, give it a like, make a comment, say something, get interaction, because interaction is what creates the momentum and lets the people who run the show know that this is somebody that people are interested in. This is a voice that we want to promote and get out there. And so it really does matter. It makes a huge difference.
Excellent. I'm glad we were able to touch on that at the end. And excellent. Very good. Thanks again for joining us. I think we could continue on and on, but I have to cut it off. So Firearms Coalition and Jeff Knox, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks to Z for joining us as well.
Anytime.